signs off. All of a sudden, I see Margaret Herridge.
That's
That's
hilarious.
fantastic.
That's hilarious.
Margaret, thanks again for joining us and spending time like this. It's such a delight to be able to be with you here. So just to maybe just start off, if you can introduce yourself and let us know who you are, what you do, and your family and so forth.
Sure. I'm Margaret Herridge. I'm Rob Stewart's wife, and we have 3 kids who are young adults. They're all in their 20s now, and we've, I think, been married for almost 35 years. I think 34 actually. So we've been married a long time. That's who I am personally. I'm a respirologist and a critical care physician at UHN. I've worked here for 23 years, and I work in the medical surgical ICU here at UHN, and my research group does research on outcomes for patients and families after critical illness.
Great, thank you. And Margaret, when did you think, and maybe there isn't a critical time, but when did you start to think, something's not right here with Rob? This is something more than just something that'll just go away. When did you start to have that sense?
Well, I have to say, when he came back from the Singapore trip visiting our daughter, and I sort of saw the extent of his cellulitis. I don't want to get too medical, I don't know for this, but I saw the extent of his cellulitis. I wasn't worried then. I was a bit alarmed, but not completely worried. I must say, after he had these multiple antibiotic treatments for the cellulitis, and it was really when he began to get the Stevens-Johnson rash, it was so bad, I have to just be honest. I kept saying to him, I don't even see rashes like this sometimes in the ICU. Like, this is extremely abnormal. And, transplant surgeons don't, they press on, right? Yeah. And Rob said, it's no problem, it'll go away. And it kept getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And I would say that, I don't know, maybe by somewhere in the late summer, early fall, and the rash, was just maybe beginning to sort of go away a bit. He was so tired, and he's a very high energy person. And that's what I noticed first. It's so unlike him to be fatigued, or to even comment to me that he was so fatigued. And then into the fall, later fall, he began to lose weight. And I must say, I was beginning to be very alarmed by that. It was clearly not deliberate weight loss, and with the lethargy and the fatigue and the weight loss, it's very hard for me to talk about this, actually. Sorry.
Yeah. No.
But anyway, so that was bad. And I think by the time around September, I must say I started to notice that he was a bit jaundiced. And I honestly, with the weight loss, and he had lost a lot of weight, with the weight loss, with the jaundice, with the marked fatigue, and he was still forcing himself to go to work every day. I actually became sort of convinced that, maybe this was a presentation of some aggressive metastatic cancer, actually.
Wow.
And I began to feel that he was dying from some malignancy that hadn't been diagnosed, because he'd been to see a lot of consultants, and no one really had a great understanding of what was going on. And I knew that. And so I was very, very worried and frightened. I would use the word frightened. I was frightened about what was about to happen, and how, we were all going to get through this, and I was going to get our kids through it.
Wow.
Actually.
Yeah. That's amazing. And would you say that I guess when you found out about his the liver issues,
Oh, shocking.
yeah, it must have
Shocking.
been shocking. Yeah,
I was
absolutely shocking.
honestly shocked. And I honestly began to wonder, I began to notice he had some bruising too. And
Mm,
so I became convinced that he had some sort of an occult malignancy and he was presenting as liver failure. And so when it seemed, when he had that diagnosis, then I thought, oh, that's it. I mean, he's got a liver full of tumor or something. And, we're looking at a very limited survival. And
mm.
that was pretty shocking. Yeah.
It's just some of the perils of knowing too much in some ways,
Oh,
right?
100%. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And also I think just seeing such a marked change in such a high energy, high functioning, super sort of smart, funny person. I mean,
Mhm,
that's his
mhm.
baseline. You sort of
Such,
get it to that point.
yeah.
Now, I don't know, but hopefully he didn't throw in too many horrible dad jokes. But anyway, but so just to see such a sort of a gradual but insidious decline. Well, it wasn't super gradual, but a decline over many months that seemed to be accelerating, and completely alarming. And honestly, I was bracing myself for this diagnosis to hear it, and then to try to understand how the kids and I were going to navigate it and support Rob through end of life. I mean, honestly, that's what I thought was about to happen. So, yeah, truly,
Yeah.
I didn't tell anybody that, but I
Oh my God.
didn't tell our kids that. I was just living with that by myself.
Oh man, oh, that's very heavy, and I can't
Truly,
imagine.
it
Yeah.
was terrible. It was actually very frightening for me. But
Oh, Margaret,
anyway,
that's really.
yeah.
And,
Anyway,
did you accompany Rob to his liver transplant assessment visit, the initial visit that he had with the
I
team?
did. Well, to all the. I mean, on the day that he ultimately went initially to see David Wong,
Mhm.
he was seeing a general internist at Women's, and he was so sick. And he had become really acutely confused, which frightened me too, because I thought, I don't know if this is sort of the metastatic cancer and he's encephalopathic from liver failure from that, or he's got some other problem. And he was really quite confused. And so we were sort of, the appointment the same day was expedited with David Wong, and then David Wong did his sort of fibroelastic testing. And when David said, the liver, the compliance was, abnormally high, and I thought, oh, that's it, And then we got quickly shuttled to, I think, Les and Nazia. And yeah, I mean, I was there for all of it, and for the initial appointments too, until Rob went on rifaximin and then got so much better initially that he said, I'm fine to go by I don't need my mother at the appointments, Mark, is what he said to me. And I said, I get it, but I want to know what's going on too. But I mean,
Yeah.
I have a lot of respect for Rob, and I get it. Just try to sort of salvage his own sense of kind of autonomy and wanting to try to preserve his ability to navigate this somewhat on his own too, without me constantly interjecting, offering too much advice, as two doctors talking to each other and spouses too for a very long time. So
Of course.
there was that. But yeah, I went initially and
Yeah.
heard the information, and then I guess I thought when they biopsied Rob, he would have lymphoma or some metastatic cancer, actually. I really still
Mm,
thought that.
mm,
So I was really quite surprised that, he had cirrhosis, and I don't know, it was pretty weird. I guess he had some giant cells. I don't know. you know, it was just pretty shocking. The whole thing was pretty shocking, Joe.
Yeah. And when you had those discussions, Margaret, initially with the liver transplant team, did they bring up the concept of living donation early on? And how did that sort of, how did you feel about that? How did that strike you?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'll tell you the day that we got the biopsy back, because they brought Rob into hospital to expedite things, which was extremely generous and kind. The day of the diagnosis, Nazia and Les brought it up, both transplantation and live donor transplantation. And I said to Rob, I'm there. We're gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. He said, you can't do that. And I said, of course I can. I said, I'm gonna do it. It's gonna work out. I'm gonna do it. So I wanted to do it during the initial sort of discussion about his diagnosis. And I really wanted to talk about it right away. And he was very upset with me. He did not want me to do it. And it took a while for him to accept that, maybe we could do this, Yeah, he did not want that. He felt it was too burdensome on me and the kids, actually.
And I understand, how did that process then sort of go about, and ultimately, I guess, were you able to, with Rob told us about your involvement in your sort of like, after hours, whatever time you needed to sort of be reaching out for potential people who might be willing to donate, and for that to come all the way back to St. Mike's. I'm just really interested in that process and what you went through there.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think that David Grant David spent a lot of time talking with us initially, and I work with David and Mark and all these guys, and I told David right off the bat, that I wanted to do this despite Rob's objections, and I think it made Davis a bit nervous thinking about operating on me, to be honest with you. And I mean that just in a good way. Like I think it's really hard to look after colleagues, because it's a bit frightening, when we all know that things can go wrong in the best of hands, and it's a lot of responsibility, and it's a bit terrifying. I feel that way if I'm looking after colleagues in the ICU. So I get that. But he spent a lot of time talking with us and educating us. He said to me right off the bat, I don't think you're going to be tall enough or big enough for Rob. He said that to me right away. Nor is your daughter. Rob and I have twin sons who were, well, at the time, they had just turned 19. And were just, they'd taken a year between university and between high school and university. They're twins. They're really close friends, to travel and to hang out, and because they knew they were going to go to different places for school. And so, David said, I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure if it's the right thing for them to go forward either. I think you guys have got to talk about it as a family. But in the meantime, just start asking other people. And I think really, I just said to him, how does one do this? I mean, I don't know how anyone does this. And he said, just think about, who are your people, who's your community really? And so Rob and I aren't religious people, so we don't have a church group or anything like that. We have a big network of friends and a large network of family, and a large network of colleagues, actually. So these are the groups that I began to contact, actually. First, to update people on what was going on and kind of the shocking news that I was sharing with everybody, and then to see if anyone was interested. And what began to happen was just so many people, and kind of I mean, I guess it's not shocking, but so many, not just friends, I mean, friends from all sorts of different stages of our life, many, many family members, but so many colleagues, Joe, came forward, and so many trainees, actually.
Wow.
And trainees, you know, Rob was the urology program director for 10 years. And so many of the urology trainees or people who graduated within the last 5 to 10 years tried to be donors for him, if you can believe that. It was incredible. And so many colleagues, or even still, I have some of my critical care colleagues or some of my respirology colleagues all over the city, or people, you know, I have been out of touch with for a while, who, you know, just have dropped me an email to say, I read the CMAG article and I just wanted you to know that actually I tried to be Rob's donor. It's unbelievable.
Wow.
You know, I was the wrong blood type. I was too small like you, Marg. I was, you know, they found some other health problem. But I was overwhelmed by that, honestly. And it was all going on, you know, as I was sort of trying to scour our connectedness and relationships with different groups of people. And I get up early in the morning to sort of, I don't know, to be by myself often, because at the unit is hard. And so I sort of do mindfulness and meditate myself early in the morning. And that was the time I got on email, and I just kept reaching out, contacting people, talking to people, sharing what was going on. But it was, I just have to say that hearing about all these trainees, I was really so touched by it. And I know, you know, Rob was a very loved program director for sure by his trainees. But still, this is, you know, this is another place, right?
Yeah, I mean,
That's another thing
amazing
to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was actually pretty amazing. So,
Yeah.
and I would just say that I reached out to all sorts of, you know, honestly, I reached out to Jillian Hawker, to the chair of anesthesia and surgery, Jim Rutka, Bev Orser. I mean, you know, everybody I knew in the U of T community who I thought would even read my email that had some connection with me. I just sent them an email of my sort of standard, this is what's happened to Rob and our family. Is there any way you can help us? And I had everyone answer, help. It's amazing.
Wow, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Margaret, how did you navigate when you initially started to reach out to people, the ask? It's a really big sort of, you know, a lot of our patients are asking, you know, they have no idea where to start. And so maybe yourself as a proxy to Rob in terms of trying to find a potential living donor, how did you navigate that?
Well, I sort of created a summary of what had happened to, a narrative of what had happened to Rob. And that, you know, Rob was, you know, waitlisted for a deceased donor, but the wait list was very long, and we had been counseled to try to seek out a live donation. I'm reaching out to you because you're someone who knows Rob or me, and I don't know if you or people you're connected to might be interested in doing this. It's an extremely generous and altruistic thing to even consider doing. And the letter is in no way, the letter has no expectations, like zero expectations. The letter is really intended to raise awareness and to maybe start people thinking and start a dialogue about this as a possibility, maybe with you or with people you know who've maybe expressed an interest in doing something like this. That was my approach, actually. Pretty low key, because
you told the story, basically.
I told the story, and it was just sort of, you may or may not be interested in this, and there are zero expectations. I just need to kind of share it, reach out, feel free to share this with other groups you belong to. And what a lot of our medical colleagues did, some of the people put this on a website for, there's a Canadian network for women physicians. I'm actually not part of that network, by the way, ironically. Probably should be, but anyway, I think it's maybe, these are kind of younger people than me and sort of got it started, and they're sort of young moms. I would have loved that, like, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, because it's a need for sure. But anyway, so people just started sharing this and extending this kind of knowledge, and reaching out through their own connections, and I guess resonating with the story, the suddenness of it, the bizarre nature of it, that we were colleagues, and that we were all trying to be assessed ourselves. I made that clear, that our family members were trying to come forward in the meantime, that we were trying to do this concurrently. And, and I personally, I felt I wanted to be at the top of the list. I knew Rob and I were the same blood type, and, but wasn't sure if it was going to work out. I just trying to create contingencies.
Very good. And through this whole experience, or with this whole experience as a spouse, as an advocate, as a caregiver, how has this sort of maybe impacted you as in your daily work as a physician who cares for very ill patients? And has that sort of informed you? Has it impacted you in the way you sort of do things now?
Yeah, I mean, I think Rob and I are kind of sort of sensitized caregivers, to be honest with you. We've had some really tricky experiences within our own family that preceded all of this. But this was the most extreme experience, for sure. There's no question. I mean, I understand through our outcomes work, how much the patients suffer. And I also understand how much burden the caregivers bear. I know that the caregivers, the patients and the caregivers in a critical illness situation often really have a lot of psychological issues afterwards, mood disorders, challenges. I really get it. And yeah, I mean, I must say I've always tried to really talk a lot to the patients and caregivers in the unit. I probably try, even harder now. I try to explain to the house staff that, you just don't understand a journey until you've honestly lived it yourself. Right. And it's just it's a human truth. You can really try to be a very empathic or sympathetic person, but honestly, you don't truly understand until you've felt the fearfulness of something, or the jeopardy of it, or the potential loss that could come from a really bad situation. And I'm very cognizant of that always. And some of the patients and families in the unit who were liver failure patients, or their caregivers, they've had an even tougher journey than Rob and I have had, and our kids and our extended family. And, not everyone's built for stress, chronic stress. Not everyone sublimates anxiety effectively. Some people really have a very, very tough time. And I try very hard to just always say to the house staff, just try to give these folks a break.
Right.
Try to really understand that they're completely stressed out and they're doing the best that they can. And honestly, these are awful places to find yourself or someone that you love, and just try to be as patient as you can. Give them your time. Just listen and try not to judge. Try very, very hard not to judge.
I think those are
So yeah,
very wise words. It's hard, challenging, but very, very wise words,
well,
I think. And
hard.
always
Yeah,
trying.
you understand, I'm not perfect. I just someone who keeps working on it. I keep trying.
as we all do, for sure. Margaret, this has been fabulous. Just as we close, anything that you wanted to share with the listeners that think we haven't covered yet, or any parting words from yourself?
Well, I'm sure Rob said this, but I want to. First of all, I can't imagine. I can't believe that I'm so upset talking to you guys about this. But you understand, it's kind of a potent memory for me still, and for my children, and for Rob and our family still. I just what can I say without crying? I'm sure Rob told you. It's been sort of a it's been hard for him to make this recovery and to really be fully ready to get back into the OR, and he's totally cognitively well now, and we have this program to thank for that. And if you're a transplant surgeon and you're a very high functioning person, it's very, very hard to not be that person. Mm-hmm. And I'll just tell you, I don't know what Rob said to you exactly, but this is really sincere. One of Rob's great joys in his career, great joys. And I think why he's such an effective mentor and turns medical students onto urology is because he loved doing kidney transplants. He loved it. He said he'd come home at night and he'd say, "Marg, I just got another person off dialysis." How great is that? I'm in the happiness business. And to not be able to get so sick that you thought you'd die or you'd never work again in the capacity that you worked, and he's going to, is a gift that we can never repay and only pass forward. And I, as Rob's wife, it's very awful to see someone so upset about all of this and not really being in a position to do much. So we have your program to thank, and the technical expertise of Mark and Anand and David's counsel and Nazia and Les. And in equal measure, I have to absolutely spend a moment and thank with all my heart Marie Ford. Mm-hmm. And Marie and I are, well, we're good friends now, but I will tell you that the most extraordinary thing is that Marie and I have always been these colleagues who are very friendly with each other, like each other a lot, and in a different universe when we weren't both so incredibly busy with work and our children and such, I have no doubt would have had the capacity to be good friends. But we weren't close before all of this. Just very thought great things about each other, but not close friends. And how Marie felt that this was something she wanted to do is, I will think about that till the day I die. I had no idea. And every time I see Marie, I cry. It's terrible. She keeps saying to me, "Mark, you've got to stop crying every time you see me." It is such an incredible thing that she did that and wanted to do it. And once she made the decision that Chuck and her kids fully supported her, mm-hmm. was extraordinary. So I owe, and Rob and our kids owe the world to Marie and the world to you guys. And anything you want us to do, we are there. I'm sure
Thank you,
Rob's
Margaret.
yeah. I thank you more than I can say. And our children who are too young to lose their dad are incredibly grateful too. And hard for our son, hard for our sons. The donor thing was a little bit complicated for them. That's maybe a separate discussion. But David felt Marie was clearly the best donor for Rob, and that certainly turned out to be the case. And we will be eternally grateful to everyone. And thanks for giving me the chance to say that.
Well, I thank you for sharing this time and this fantastic. I mean, it was such an amazing journey that you went through, and you've shared it so beautifully and eloquently. So thank you for that. And I think the listeners of this video will really benefit tremendously from this.
I'm sorry.
And I want to say, I think, not at all, not at all. And I want to say, I think Rob said it earlier, but I think we tend to use the word hero too lightly in normal parlance. But I think the word hero is very apt for living donors like Marie. Truly our heroes.
Marie is truly a hero and deserves all of the accolades that go with that very apt label. 100%.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mark. That was fantastic. That was so great. Thank you.
Thank you.